Hey everyone, Howie Fisher with Precision Fly Fishing in Mount Holly Springs, Pennsylvania, and today we're tying up a super simple jig sculpin pattern with all the rain that we've had here in Pennsylvania at the time of this recording. Something like this is going to be a great streamer, great option to go out and search for a lot of water with a fly that mimics sculpin and even some small bait fish in the water. So let's go ahead and get started. And the nice thing about this fly is you can fish it on a Euro rig, you can fish it with just a traditional line, you can jig it, you can strip it, you can dead drift it. But to get started with the hook here, I'm using an Ahrex Predator 360 in size 4. This is a 50-degree jig hook from Ahrex. And then I'm using a 6.4 millimeter slotted tungsten bead from Fulling Mill in copper. I always carry a range of these weights or flies with me, so I'll use a 6.4. I'll tie the same size fly in a 4.6 or a 5.4 millimeter as well, or 5.5. And so that way, if the water is a little bit lower than you expected, or you run up on a super deep hole, you can switch weights, switch sizes to get down or to not get down as far. The thread today, I'm using 140 Denier UTC from. For the thread today, I'm using 140 Denier UTC in light olive. You can use olive as well, or you could even really use black, whatever you prefer. I'm using 0.015 lead-free wire just to keep the bead in place and add a little bit of weight. Again, use as little or as much as you'd like, depending on the waters you're fishing, or if you want to have some different weighted flies. I'm going to do about 15 wraps of that wire on there, maybe 20. And then get started with my thread right behind that wire, and just going to build up a dam behind that wire, and then take a bunch of wraps over that wire. Make sure it's not going anywhere. You can add super glue if you like to. You don't really need to. By the time you finish this fly, that lead-free wire is going to be pretty well covered. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my thread just a little bit back into the bend here, and I like to add a little bump here just to make sure that the rabbit strip that we're going to add doesn't, pull forward or slide forward. Again, more of a preference than a necessity, but when you're adding nothing, I'm just doing thread on this body. So it can help, like I said. If you don't do that, sometimes you'll get a rabbit strip that slides forward. Here I'm using Fulling Mill standard rabbit zonker strips in olive barred brown. Again, great thing about this fly is it's really versatile. You can change up the colors. So here's an all black one that I did with red thread on the underbody and the collar. And then here's a yellow and olive one I did. You can do black and purple, tan, brown, just mix the colors up. But I'm going to measure that just about the length of the hook shank. And then I'm going to come through here, poke that through the hide, and then take it out of my vise real quick and just slide it forward. And you got to remember that this fly is going to ride like this, so it's going to ride hook point up. So I'm going to flip my vise over, and then I'm just going to capture this and take a couple wraps. Once I do that, I'm going to snip off my rest of my rabbit here. I like to keep this a little bit shorter. Depending on the fibers of the actual fibers of the rabbit, I'll cut it shorter or longer. And then I'm just going to cut this at an angle to give it a little taper. And the hopes here is the shorter this is, you want to kind of have to strike the right balance of it being long enough to give it the motion of the rabbit that you want it to, but also not being too long where you're more likely to get a short strike. This step's optional, but I like to add a little bit of flash in here. I'm just using Krystal flash in Rainbow Pearl. Kind of matches the green color, but also gives a little contrast with the pink and the yellow that's in here. Whether that matters or not actually is a different question, but I'm going to take 3 strands. I'm going to tie it in on one side, and then I'm going to take those same 3 strands and I'm just going to fold it over here and bring it essentially straight towards the camera, which is away from me, and then just pull it, lightly pull it back so that these are facing backwards. And you can see I've got that evenly done on both sides. If it's kind of pulled down or up or on one side, it's really easy to just grab those fibers and just kind of lightly pull them into place. Before I move forward, I'm just going to snip these about the length of the tail. You can come in and snip them shorter if you want, or leave one long and kind of play with it. Again, not that it necessarily probably matters. And then lastly, last step of this fly is these leggy Voodoo brushes from Fulling Mill. Here I'm using brown olive. These things are just super awesome. And I'm just gonna take this and I'm gonna tie it in right behind the bead. And you've noticed I've given myself probably about 1/4 of an inch here at the head to do this. You can, again, play with this. So you can do really tight, close wraps and build up a really bulky head, kind of like I've done on this one right here. Or you can just do 2 or 3 wraps and make it a little bit sparser. The sparser it is technically, even with this bigger bead on it, the slower or the faster it should sink. If you want it to sink a little slower or just have bigger profile, bigger volume, you can, again, take really close, tight touching wraps, and that will help it to slow down and also build that profile. So I've done 3 full wraps here, 3.5 I guess technically, and then I'm going to take some wraps in front of and behind just to make sure that this is going to not go anywhere. And then I'm using my cheap scissors here. Don't use your good scissors to cut wire. And then only thing you have to watch out for on this part is when you cut that wire, you will have a tag end left, and it'll split your thread really easily when you're doing the whip finish. So I like to just kind of take either my fingers and push it forward. You can use like the butt end of your whip finisher or a bodkin even to push it into the back side of that slotted bead to keep it out of your way. And last step, I'm going to grab my whip finisher and do 2 or 3 3-turn whip finishes and snip it off. And I'm just going to give it a little brush out with my dubbing brush. And lastly, I'm going to coat these thread wraps in some Solar as bone dry, and just to give it some added durability. But there you have it. Again, this is a super simple, really sculpin baitfish pattern. It really, if you take this flash out, it's really just a 2 material fly in 2 steps. Super simple, super effective, and you can kind of just build off of this platform and tie a bunch of different variations with it. But thanks for checking in. Stop by the shop and pick up any materials you need.